Hi everybody, this is SideQuest, hosted by Jake Meck. This is the show where we talk about video games and video gaming related news. Today we have our two guests, Keegan Height and Keegan number 2. Because we have two Keegans.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jake.
All right. So today on the show we're going to talk about Dark Souls 3, the newest game by From Software. It's a, we actually have the original one right here. It's a, recently the sequel to the Dark Souls franchise. It's a very difficult, challenging RPG action game. And what are your thoughts on it, Keegan?
Okay. In my opinion, each of the games in the series are amazing. Right there, you should go and play it right now. It's not really something you should really spoil. It's dark fantasy. It is a game where you go into it and you shouldn't really have much knowledge beforehand and going in. You basically fight hard bosses, you level up, just general RPG, what do you call it?
Mechanics, that kind of.
Mechanics. You go into it, defeat bosses, get progressively harder, and more meets the eye with Dark Souls. It's a very formulaic on paper, but then it turns into something else the more you play it. And it's kind of hard to talk about it without spoiling it, but we can kind of spoil a little bit. So what are you?
You know, I love Dark Souls. I started playing 2 years ago with the first one on PC, which was probably the hardest thing ever because
PC controls.
Yeah.
Those keyboards. they don't work well for Dark Souls.
And it took me about a year to finally beat, around when I got Dark Souls 2. I kind of drifted away from the series there. I didn't really like Dark Souls 2, but the third one brought me back in. It takes a lot from the first game. And
yeah, I'd agree with that. I've enjoyed all of the Souls games, even from the original Demon Souls, which the Dark Souls series spawned off of. And I think they're all terrific. But yeah, the first one I really fell in love with, just everything about it, the music, the design, the basic themes of the game that actually had this really emotional storytelling underneath all of it once you figured out what it was really about. Dark Souls 2 was a terrific game. I felt it was very fun to play. At least to me.
People don't like it as much because another game company took over development, like Hidetaka Miyazaki, the guy who was the creator for Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, now Dark Souls 3. He was more so a supervising role for Dark Souls 2.
Yeah, and it was still a great game. It had a lot of really great elements, really good qualities. I see why people love it. It did kind of suffer from the creativity department than Dark Souls 1 or 3, which brings us to Dark Souls 3, in that it takes the best elements, at least in my opinion, of Dark Souls 1, that same level of creativity in the boss design and music and the world, but then adds in the fun gameplay elements that were introduced into Dark Souls 2, namely the higher list of items and weapons and combat moves that you can use with the boss design and level world creation that was present in Dark Souls 1. Mainly just because Dark Souls, compared to most fantasy art games, when people think of them, Dark Souls is very different. It may seem like
a very obscure story. It doesn't the strangest thing about Dark Souls is that it puts all the normal AAA conventions over its head. A lot of games today, they're too easy, or they just kind of spoon feed you the story.
You have to fight the monster. You have to save the day. You have to be the hero.
Yeah, Dark Souls, it's not going to do that for you. All you'll really get is you'll get the boss. You'll get a little information from the items they might drop. You might get a little bit of dialogue. Most of the bosses don't have dialogue in these games.
There's hardly any dialogue at all in Dark Souls.
Right.
I mean, there's a few characters you'll talk to occasionally, but other than maybe a few that are mentally unstable and speak gibberish, you really don't know much about the world. So the very few pieces of information you get are always chock full of this, just this really good writing that clues you in on this larger story. I would say something kind of similar to it, I guess, for people who aren't into video games. Mad Max Fury Road was a movie a lot of people loved because it was able to present storytelling more through action and presentation than through just direct dialogue or background explanation, which I would say Dark Souls is similar. It conveys its story through game design, world design, and very subtle hints of detail that convey this larger, almost kind of tragic story of this bigger, larger world.
Right.
This greater canvas that, like, as you progress through the game, you kind of like piece the puzzle pieces together, and then really there are even like entire communities dedicated to like analyzing these little bits of dialogue and information from the items you get and trying to dissect the greater story that's going around behind all this.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the story most of all that makes Dark Souls a good game. It's the fact that it respects you as a player. It doesn't hold your hand through all of it. It kind of just...
Yeah. It treats you like you know, or at least it treats you as if you know what you're doing.
Right.
Like it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't handhold you. And especially, I know Dark Souls 2 kind of went down a little bit in some people's opinions, but they're all like this, but especially 1 and 3, every time you die or you fail something, it's because it's your fault for the most part. You never really die of cheap deaths or things that you couldn't avoid. There's always a way around it. Like, you could play the entire game, like, without really any interruptions at all, any tutorials, anything, and not die a single time if you know what to do.
Right.
Again, because it's a skill-based game where it's based on your timing, reaction, your strategies that you use. But that's what's so great about Dark Souls, is that unlike most other games, there really isn't a way to just, there's not just one hint or tip that you could use where you can get through it like any other game, like say Half-Life, for example. There's a challenging part, you could just look up a guide, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that.
I mean, you could look up the guide, but
to an extent.
that
like,
defeats the purpose.
Yeah, but the thing with Dark Souls is because it's skill-based in the way that you fight monsters and fight enemies and the way you navigate the world, it's based more on the way you go through it personally. It's not like there's one specific way you have to go through it. You can know all of the boss's patterns and still die every time because you physically just don't have the reflexes to constantly use the dodge move or know the exact timing of when to hit with your special power-up item on your weapon. And yeah, it's very, very skill-based.
It's a game around mastery, and when you are able to master these mechanics in the game, either whether it's just for a boss or for PvP, which is also back in Dark Souls 3.
It's terrific in Dark Souls.
In a amazing way.
Yeah. And that's another thing we should probably bring up about Dark Souls 3, and really the Souls series as a whole, is that while they are single-player, self-contained adventure RPG games that borrow heavily from roguelikes and Legend of Zelda of all things, actually, like the 3D ones, there is a very strong multiplayer component that isn't a separate mode, it's integrated with the story. So you will go through the levels like normal, and you can either be invaded or helped by other players. You can find messages written on the ground that appear and disappear randomly, and you go up to them and you can summon other players to help you for a section, or they can be invaders who could try and kill you and take your stuff. So it constantly reinforces this idea that, which the games kind of present anyway, is that even though everything is really, the whole world's full of despair, there's still the sense of hope that you have to kind of find on your own. You have to like reach out to other people for help. You can't just like, no one there is going to help you on their own. You have to make the effort. You have to be the one who fights through all the dark monsters and everything. And I just think that's really cool. It doesn't explain all this through story dialogue or some monologue that a character says where he's like, oh, you have to, like the Rocky speech or something where there's some wise man who teaches your character to be the hero. You physically have to be the hero or else you just can't beat the game. You can't get any farther.
And when you're a hero, you get that sense of like satisfaction once you finally get through that. And yeah, you could do some summoning and like you know, get a friend or just some random.
Cheese your way through it at some parts.
Yeah. Really, Dark Souls lets you make your own difficulty with it, but you could let somebody summon. You could summon people or go into another person's world and help them with a boss. Or you can join an invasion covenant, for example, and start killing the other guys right before they get to the boss.
Yes.
And you like, I had a great experience last night where I was in one of like the later levels, and just as I was going through like a boss area, I was invading people, like and they were just like running to the boss, trying to like get to it. And I know it's kind of a troll thing to do on my part, but I kind of like stop them from being able to do that.
You can be as much of a jerk or a helpful guardian in Dark Souls as you want, and that's one of the things that makes it really great as well. But yeah, Dark Souls 3 came out in Japan on March 21st, and it came out in America on April 12th. But yeah, even though it should be kind of clear now from the way we've been speaking so highly of it, but would you recommend it?
Oh, definitely. It's my favorite game. I mean, it's my first tattoo and everything.
Oh, you have a Dark Souls tattoo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, in short.
Yeah, I would say Dark Souls is a terrific game. It's one of the best current franchises that's going on right now. Even though the third game's technically the last one in the series, From Software can still take the same formula and move it on to another named franchise, such as Bloodborne, which is a very similar game they made. Yeah, it's a terrific action RPG. You can make your own character, you can go through these worlds, and you constantly feel a sense of accomplishment because you physically have to kind of skillfully get through it all. And it's a really terrific game with some beautiful music and really just crazy monster and boss and world designs. I mean, that was one of the things people didn't like about Dark Souls 2 is how much more mundane it felt compared to the other ones. But Dark Souls 3, on the other hand, at least for me so far, I think is one of the most creative looking games I've ever seen. I mean, the monsters in it, just the general levels, even if they're not terribly original, the way they present them, such as like a castle area, is done in such a crazy way where it's lifted up like 1,000 feet into the sky and you can see all the mountains right below you and the actual rocks sticking out, like this entire like city just shot up into the air. It's really great art design. And yeah, it's a very memorable, really good game. You can sink a lot of hours into it. So yeah, I would also very obviously recommend Dark Souls 3. So for our next segment, what is a game that you guys have played recently that you would say you would recommend, like that has come out in the last year or so?
I don't know, you played Division, right?
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of the Division. I just got to level 30 today, which is the level cap, so now the game's like open to me.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a good game. It has kind of a Destiny aspect to it where it's
MMO shooter, single player.
Shoot for hours, find some loot, wash, rinse, repeat.
Borderlands style.
Yeah. The story's lacking, but, I mean, you wouldn't expect that from that kind of...
Yeah, shooter type game.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I've heard some mixed things about The Division. I've heard it's fairly fun, but if you're not really into that mindset of, like, that Borderlands Destiny mindset, you'll be disappointed with it.
I found if you're alone, it gets a lot...
Yeah.
It's old.
Because it's a very, like, team-based type game. Do you have a game that you would recommend that you've been playing recently?
Well, I haven't really been playing it recently, but I got Undertale like a few months ago, back when it came out in December, I believe. It was a short, sweet, but really I'd say just like fun game, really. It's another RPG-esque, this only Earthbound-inspired game, and it's just a unique experience where you go into this odd little world where you're just like dropped into a cavern, and where there are a bunch of monsters, and you either have to go through it, not kill anything, or you can go through it and just befriend everything in a pacifist route.
Which is cool about it, because like you can
Yeah.
either play it like or what your idea of a hero would be, someone who's like a pacifist, like a Batman type character who like, tries to save everybody, or just like a Conan the Barbarian type way who just murders everything in your path.
It'd be interesting going through Undertale, looking at your character as Batman. I'd say
Yeah.
that. But no, I've been playing the game with Jake recently, and it's been a fun experience. And so I'd say like, it's almost like a visual novel, really. Has
Yeah,
some
I agree with that.
Yeah, it has some combat in it, but it's really more of a story-based game. You're more in it to like explore the mechanics that'll throw at you, and what kind of like things will happen in the story, you know?
Yeah, the story is very, surprisingly very well written.
It sounds generic,
yeah,
too.
and that's kind of what makes it work, is that very similarly to Dark Souls, actually, it takes a very, not necessarily generic, but kind of mundane premise for a game, especially like a 16-bit type retro game, where you're a little kid who has to navigate a dangerous world and befriend monsters and things like that. And what it does, as far as what we were talking about pacifism versus violence, is kind of the main theme of the game. And that's reinforced through the actual gameplay, because you either decide to, fight some monsters, or you decide to talk your way through them, or, and the characters in the game react to what you do. So it's not like there's really one set path of the plot. It reacts to how you are, like what your choices are, and the game really speaks to like your character, the way you think people should go through situations that would involve either, being aggressive or being pacifistic.
Without any spoilers, depending on how you play the game, not only does the story react, but the mechanics react to the game,
Yeah.
to how you're playing too.
The game almost completely changes depending on like the types of the decisions that you make throughout it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Undertale, it's a really terrific game, yeah. A lot of people it's been getting a lot of buzz in the indie circuit as well. It's one of like this past year's like highest like ranking games by pretty much everybody.
Got a few awards, didn't it?
Yeah, it did, especially for its soundtrack. I know there was an official jazz band that did a whole cover of the entire soundtrack for them because they liked it so much. So yeah, Undertale's a great game. Now for the game that I would like to recommend, just because it's kind of in time for the new Doom sequel, would be Doom 3. It's I feel as if it's been a bit underappreciated by a lot of people. After the Halo Call of Duty era of gaming, when shooters got a lot slower and a lot more tactical, as opposed to like the sort of fast-paced arcadey Wolfenstein original Doom era shooters, there was a lot of flack that Doom 3 got, mainly just because of how slow and methodical it was compared to the old ones. And it didn't really play like the old ones on a strictly gameplay level, since you moved very slowly. It was very atmospheric. You really only fought a few monsters at a time. However, I personally really love Doom 3. I think even though it is much slower, it actually, at least from what we've seen so far, it feels more like a Doom game than even from what we've seen of the new Doom sequel that they've for some reason called Doom without a 4 on the end of it, so people get it confused with the old one. But it plays very similarly to the old ones in terms of level design, since you're constantly under this pressure of feeling underpowered or overwhelmed by this larger force, and you're constantly going through these dark environments and being attacked from monster closets where enemies pop out. And despite the slow pace, it still plays like an old school shooter. You have a weapon wheel, you have your health bar, there's no regenerating shields or anything like that. You have to scrounge and scavenge for your own ammo and health packs. And overall, I just think it's a really terrific atmospheric shooter that really stands up there with Dead Space and BioShock. And I would suggest to people who are interested in the new Doom to probably pick up Doom 3 at some point. It's a great starting grounds for the series, and yeah, I just feel like it gets a lot of undeserved hate towards it just because it wasn't the arcadey type game that some people might have wanted. But yeah, those are our recommendations. So
Yeah.
now we're going to talk about the news, because in the gaming world, there's some good news, apparently. So I have to
Somehow.
ask, do you guys own a PlayStation 4?
Yeah.
He does.
Okay. How much was that PlayStation 4?
300, something like
$300? Okay,
Yeah.
that's nice. Would you like to know that they're coming out with a brand new PlayStation 4 that's not only, it's not just a remodeling. It's not like a thinner model or something. It's an entirely new version called the PlayStation Neo, which is significantly more expensive, as they've stated. They haven't directly said what the exact price point will be, but they will state it's going to be more expensive than the original PlayStation 4 launch price. So we're looking at maybe $500, $600, we don't really know. And it runs, and we have the exact specs here, 4K resolution. It has a higher clock speed, improved GPU, higher memory bandwidth, and like I said, 4K image quality. But essentially, you're paying a lot more money. What really the main selling point's the 4K resolution. Higher memory bandwidth is nice, but you can get that with an add-on. So essentially, they've cranked out the price on their old console, and they've said that while there won't be any gameplay exclusive elements to the PlayStation Neo, like no, for example, there won't be any games exclusive to it. That doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be games that have features that will be limited to the Neo. At least as of right now, from what we've heard, they haven't specified that at all. So that may change in the future, it might not. So as a PS4 owner, how do you feel about that?
When did the PS4 come out?
The PS4 came out 2013.
Okay, so if they waited, if they didn't, like, it's hard to put it, why didn't they just wait 3 years to realize that, hey, we can do something a little better?
Yeah.
It seems pointless, honestly. It's like the Xbox Slim.
Yeah.
Like, why crank out a new one when you could just fix the old one?
Yeah.
Or the Elite.
Some
Red Ring of Doom.
Yes, that's very true. We all have, well, not me, because I used to be a Sony person, but I know many people who have horror stories of the Xbox 360 breaking down and exploding and causing their house to catch on fire.
I never
And then they
had
get
that.
relocated to North Korea, because
Yeah.
that's what happens when the Red Ring of Death happens.
But I have to say that I would not have been happy if my Xbox ever did that.
Mine did.
He fought through North Korea, by the way, if it wasn't immediately clear. He has the war scars all over him, and his haircut and everything. It's
Yeah.
from the North Korean prison camps.
Yeah, the tattoos just to cover up the worst one.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of consoles do stuff similar to this, where they'll bring out like a slimmer model or like a slightly nicer one, and that, like, at least to me, I don't really have any problems with. The problem I do have with this is that while obviously, like they said, there's no exclusive games for the system, so you can play all the same games. But all games that are going to be coming out after this upcoming September will have to be have this feature enabled where it'll allow 4K resolution. So if you're a developer and you want to make a game for the PlayStation 4, primarily like a disc-based game, not necessarily like the arcade, like download digitally games, it has to support 4K resolution, which is not only like crazy expensive if you're a developer, but also it incentivizes certain developers to add certain PlayStation 4 4K exclusive features that you wouldn't be able to use possibly if they decide to go with this, that regular PS4 users like you wouldn't be able to use if you didn't have it, which is really kind of crappy, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
If that's the direction they're going, and they haven't directly said if they're going to change that or not. That's mainly just speculation from what bits and pieces have come out about it. But yeah, it's not looking too good.
Yeah, I feel like what that's just gonna do is I also play on PC, and I just finished building my own PC, and because the one I had before was from back in like 2004, so all the new games coming out, the ultra settings were saying they're taunting me, and that I feel like that's the feeling gamers are gonna get now. It's like it's there, but you can't have it.
And that's especially bad for console owners, because one of the main selling points of consoles is just to be able to, have the console, put the game in, and be able to play. There is no settings, no like better version, lower version. It's just you put the game in and it works. That's kind of the main shtick of consoles. There's nothing else. There's not supposed to be anything else to them.
Right. Yeah.
It's basically like they're turning consoles very slowly into very under-optimized PCs, where you have all these features and settings you can go through, but they don't really change enough to where it really matters.
Right.
But just enough so that way it's kind of detrimental to just the basic gamer's experience of just wanting to play a game.
Right.
We already experienced this with console games enforcing very long load times to install games. You can't just put the disc in the system and play it. So hopefully this is a trend they'll learn to stop doing. But as of right now, if this is true, that's not looking too good. And yeah, that's there aren't really any new developments in the gaming world as of right now. Other than that, other than really speculation-related things like when the new sequel to Mirror's Edge comes out or that kind of stuff. The only other real noteworthy thing I guess we could talk about as far as news is the Mass Effect theme park. This is a real thing. There's a Mass Effect theme park that's going to open up in California. Oh, you haven't even heard about it.
I haven't even heard of this.
So you know how Disney has the like Tower of Terror?
Yes.
It's the elevator that falls. Is this just going to be a 20-minute elevator ride?
No, it's a full-on attraction. It's not just one ride. It's like an attraction. It might not be an entire park. Like they're going to develop it in like as a part of an existing theme park, but it's going to be like a permanent like attraction area. It's not just like one ride. It's like a full, like an entire section of Disneyland. This is like what that would be equivalent to.
I think that's awesome.
I think it's awesome.
I looked it up a while ago, and the way they it looks like they're advertising it is play Mass Effect in real life, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because it's Mass Effect.
Yeah, and it comes in time for the new one too, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, Andromeda, which that's coming out in 2017, right?
Yes. So whenever the park's finished, or that section of the park, I should say, it should come in about time for the new one.
I'm not sure how to feel about this, to be honest. I mean, on the one hand, I like Mass Effect because it has a great story up until the third one. I think
some people.
I think there's good amount of knowledge around that already. But Mass Effect, I could see a Star Wars theme park. I could see there's already a Star Wars theme park, kind of, in Disneyland. But I don't see there's enough lore, not even lore, just like things in the Mass Effect universe to make an entire theme park about it. I mean, what, are you going to have like a Krogan ride somewhere? Are you going to have...
Well, I mean, like you're bringing up Star Wars, and I think it's a good thing because as video games are becoming more like into our culture as they are now, from instead of just like some form of entertainment to actual art, it's better. It's like...
It's kind of getting people who aren't affiliated with games kind of more interested or into
right.
gaming.
It's like, hey, there's this other thing here.
This big franchise that could potentially compete with Star Wars in some people's opinions.
Right.
I would actually agree with that for the first two games, but yeah.
My question would be is, like, how big is Mass Effect? It's a popular game, no doubt about that, but how much could the idea of a Mass Effect theme park draw in terms of like people wanting to like pay $60, which you could use to buy the entire collection, to go on like a Mass Effect ride? Like, could that be economically viable? I don't know.
I mean, you said it was a part of an actual park.
Yeah, it's not an entire theme park itself. It's going to be like a subsection of a bigger park in California.
Right. Yeah.
But it would be like I said, like equivalent to like a section of Disneyland or like a section of I don't know if you guys been to Canopy Lake Park, but it would be like say like one section of that park, like the water park area. It would be like the equivalent of that. It would be its own
Right.
Mass Effect area with Mass Effect related things going on. I think it's a neat idea. It is a bit strange, just because out of all the games that at least I personally would want a theme park out of, that's
Like, I
not
could
really
see-
the highest on my list.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mind it though. I would go to it though, if I had if it was available to go to.
Yeah, like I could see a Zelda, and of course, since it's most popular, Mario.
Yeah, but in other news, and I'm not sure if you've played it yet or not, the Remedy shooter Quantum Break has now become the #1 best-selling Xbox One game. Remedy is especially known for the Max Payne series. They created it, and it was eventually handed off to Rockstar. Then they made Alan Wake, which is another cult classic horror game. Quantum Break is their newest IP. It's kind of like a spiritual successor to Alan Wake and Max Payne, since Remedy's known primarily for third-person action games with a heavy emphasis on storytelling and atmosphere. And as a really big fan of Max Payne, I'm actually kind of surprised that Quantum Break just leaped the charts even past Grand Theft Auto 5, or at least on the Xbox One, or even the Halo 5 or Halo Master Chief Collection. It's I mean, it's great news. It's just very unprecedented that this new IP that
Right.
you wouldn't think a lot of, especially like younger kids or kids who probably shouldn't be playing Xbox, but let's face it, kind of make up the demographic of a lot of these games, like Grand Theft Auto 5, for example.
Kids have the most time to play games. That's
Yeah.
a fact.
That's why
Like-
they always beat us.
Yeah, and scream at us through their headsets and say really horrific stuff about us. But point is, I'm just surprised that out of all the games that could be at the very top of the list, like Grand Theft Auto 5, which was
Right.
on the top for a while, that Quantum Break of all games would be the one to shatter that. At least on Xbox.
I don't understand that.
Like beforehand, the only thing I knew about Quantum Break was that Aidan Gillen, the plain guy from Dark Knight Rises,
And Peter Baelish
Peter
from Game of
Baelish
Thrones.
was in it.
From
And
the
that
Thrones, yeah.
Yeah, and that was all I know. So to hear that this new IP by the Alan Wake creators is coming in is really surprising to me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I heard it was a quality game. I haven't bought it yet. I did play the demo. It was a fun, well put together third-person shooter with some cool ideas with the time travel elements and things like that. But I'm just surprised that of all the games that are coming out, or that have come out in the past few months, that this is the one that just curb stomps everything on the Xbox One. I mean, I know the Xbox One isn't indicative of all gamers, obviously, but the fact that on one console alone, with all those huge hits like Grand Theft Auto 5, Tomb Raider, Fallout 4, it blew past those in just like a week, really.
Right. I think that's because Xbox is treating this thing like it's their baby.
Yeah.
Like everything, all Xbox ads for the past 2 months have been Quantum Break.
Quantum Break.
Quantum Break.
Did you know the guy from Game of Thrones is in Quantum Break? You should buy Quantum Break.
And, advertising definitely does come down to it. Also, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe
Yeah.
a bunch of kids have birthdays this month.
And they just word of mouth. I mean, there was obviously a lot of advertisement for Halo 5, but I'm surprised that didn't even sell as well comparatively, considering how big name of franchise that is.
Does
I
Quantum
mean-
Break even have any multiplayer in it?
No, I believe it's just single player only, or at least the single player is the main focus. It's not
Right.
like Halo or Call of Duty where you split between the two modes. It's like single player. The story is like the main meat of the game.
It's very odd when you hear that, like a single player oriented game.
A new
is-
IP, like-
and a new IP is getting like the most traction. And like, who knows? Maybe that says something about the state of like the AAA industry at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most original game ever made, but the fact that it's something new and different, I think, kind of resonates in a lot of people. Call of Duty has lost a lot of sales in recent years from being the big juggernaut system seller it used to be. So I think people are starting to kind of realize, and by people I mean the general like gaming public, not necessarily people who are more into it like us, like people
Right.
who just buy games and they just play them casually now and then. I think most people are starting to kind of realize that a lot of games are very much just the same thing over and over and are looking for something new. So maybe that's why it just sold so well. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Remedy, so I'm happy that it made so much sales. So yeah, that's it for news. Now this is to the our last segment of the show. This is our personalized recommendations, our awards to games that we feel need more traction. So I know you, Keegan number 2, have very strong opinions about a particular game, and I was wondering maybe if you would like to share those first.
You know, I was thinking about sharing that one, but after news that came out this week, we have to go with Red Dead Redemption.
Okay, thank God. Because I know what you were going to recommend before, and we can't really talk about that on a public access channel where fragile old people and little kids may be watching.
But no, if you've heard, the Red Dead Redemption 2 map was leaked and and verified, and that's like big for me because when I first got my Xbox, the first game I got was Red Dead because I like westerns, and it was such a great game.
It was terrific.
I played it for about four years and then just off and on until some dude decided to ruin my life and take down the servers.
Some dude at Rockstar.
No, it was a hacker.
Oh, wow.
He like bugged the servers and Rockstar just didn't do anything about it. So
That stinks.
yeah, so
But
it's happening.
yeah, I mean they're making a new one, and you know Red Dead's a great game. It's but how would you like to describe it though? Like
So I think it's just taking everything from a cowboy movie and kind of pushing, like every Clint Eastwood movie,
Yeah.
pushing that into one.
yeah.
You're not going to say GTA with horses?
I mean, well, to be fair, that is kind of
That's basically it.
That's not
But
even
like if
that's the description like a lot of people say about Red Dead. It's
Right.
just Grand Theft Auto with horses, but
But
there's more.
when
to
you
it,
get
though.
down to the story, it's not that. Like, Grand Theft Auto is all about blowing up cars and robbing people.
It's a cartoon. It's like a really horribly messed up Tom and Jerry cartoon. There's not
Red-
supposed to be an emotion to it.
Red Dead is about. It's like it's like a dude. He's not anyone like special or anything. He's just trying to get his life together and buy a farm and chill. And that's what made it special.
Yeah, it kept like it had very sympathetic characters, and you kept even though you were like a this badass cowboy type character,
Right.
you felt really attached to the characters because they just felt real. It didn't feel like an average video game story like
Right.
Grand Theft Auto. Where
It wasn't a dude who got off a boat and is now somehow the warlord of New York or something.
Yeah,
I just want to farm, bros.
I just want to save my family and move on from life, and that's what made his character John Marston, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, John Marston. But yeah, Red Dead Redemption's a terrific game. What would you say is your personal pick?
Well, I'd have to say that my personal pick and one of my most favorite games of all time is Knights of the Old Republic 2.
Yes.
And that would be because you know how Star Wars sometimes gets a little bit of flack for being a kid-friendly, kind of like watered-down story, which, to be fair, especially with the newer ones and like the TV series that's come out, it kind of is.
Yeah, to an extent, yeah.
Well, what's unique about this, it's made by BioWare, the same people who made the Mass Effect series that we were talking about a little while ago. And this is in like the earlier days of BioWare, where nothing like Mass Effect 3 would happen.
Yeah, when they had good writers on their team. When they didn't fire half of the good writers from their team.
What's interesting about Knights of the Old Republic 2 is that it kind of puts Star Wars into a more realistic setting. Like, it's more philosophical. It's another RPG where you go through levels, you uncover a story, but also has like characters around it who are just as engaging as like Mass Effect or like characters from any modern TV show. backing it up, and who you interact with, and they end up following you, and your decisions in the story, like in other RPGs that we were talking about, your actions affect what they want to do and what they are going to do.
Like we kind of said, like it's not as clear cut as like, oh, this is the Jedi master who's going to teach you all the tricks and of being like a Jedi Knight, or like, you know, the villain. It's kind of hard to talk without spoiling it, but there is more to it. There's reasoning behind everything.
Yeah.
But
to end it off, go and buy Knights of the Old Republic 2 right now.
It's like $10 on Steam, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very cheap.
And the weird thing about it is, since Disney acquired the rights to Star Wars, they put out an update for it, so there's new stuff that even I don't really know about it in the game right now.
Which is really cool. It's a good time to actually get back into it then, if in that case, especially in time for the new movie.
Oh yeah.
But so we got Knights of the Old Republic 2 and Red Dead Redemption. My pick for an underappreciated game that I've been playing recently, surprisingly, there's actually a few games I would mention, like Mad Max, Sunset Overdrive. But I'm actually going to have to go with Sunset Overdrive. It's an Xbox exclusive game, Xbox One specifically. They may have ported it to Windows, but it's Microsoft still, so it's basically the same thing. It's a really terrific sandbox game in the vein of Saints Row 4. You're a super-powered rocker punk, and you make a character like Saints Row. You can make them however you want, really. And you run through the city with, even though you're just a normal person, like with shoes on and regular clothing, you somehow have skating powers on your feet and everywhere else on you. So you can grind along a rail that you see, that you just run up on it and just kind of grind on it like you're riding a skateboard, or do some kind of flip up into the air while you're fighting enemies. And it's really cool because you're just traversing this open world environment. It's like a city, but you're playing it. It makes you feel like a superhero in a way, but there's no stamina bar or any meter that runs out. You can just keep running along it as this just crazy cartoon character doing all these really insane, totally unrealistic stunts. And you fight these mutant ODs who are overdosers who are obsessed with this toxic energy drink that made everyone turn into horrible flesh-eating mutants.
It's just called Sunset Overdrive, right?
No, it's called
Overdrive.
Oh yeah, it's just called Overdrive.
Okay.
And the game has this really great sense of humor. It's a lot lighter than Saints Row. It's not as cynical or politically driven per se. My only real complaint with it is that some of the jokes fall a little flat. There are a lot. It relies very heavily on references to film and movies and other games. Well, there'll be a Breaking Bad reference, and it's not very clever. It's just clear cut, oh, look, this character is like the one from Breaking Bad, but it doesn't really make a joke out of it. It just kind of has it there. And I would say a lot of the jokes and humor of that game kind of fall under that category where the writers really weren't able to come up with anything funny per se, but just references. But other than that, everything else about the game I absolutely love. It's a really, really fun sandbox shooter game, shooter action, skateboarding, parkour game, where you just fly around the city like a madman, fighting mutants and upgrading your character to be even more cartoonish. And then it really does just turn into a giant Tom and Jerry cartoon that's horribly messed up. But yeah, Sunset Overdrive, it's a great game. I really haven't heard anyone talk about it since it first came out. But I think it's a great game. I think it's just as good gameplay-wise as Saints Row 4, a very similar sandbox open-world game. So yeah, we have Red Dead Redemption, Knights of the Old Republic 2, and Sunset Overdrive. And those are some games we think you should probably pick up or take a look at least one time or another. But yeah, this has been our first episode of SideQuest. I'm Jacob Meck. This is Keegan Height. Keegan number 2, because we have 2 Keegans on the show.
Keegan nephew as well.
Yes. And this has been SideQuest. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time for our next episode.